All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to, I think this is week 12. Does that sound right
Yep.
now? 12
Yeah.
of the TriState Football Monday Night Rewind. Of course, as always, I am your host, Daniel Kuhn, alongside my co host, Jacob Berkemeier. And we're here to talk about everything that happened last weekend across the tri-state in terms of high school football action. And obviously, as you all know, we're pretty knee deep into the playoff stuff now. Both Ohio and Indiana, I think Indiana may have had 2 weeks already, but Ohio
Yeah.
had their first weekend of action. Indiana had their second week of action. And then this weekend, we've got Kentucky coming down the barrel for us. So we've got three different state tournaments to talk about. So we're going to try to keep it as short as humanly possible tonight. But of course, with the playoffs, there's a lot to cover. But exciting, I think, first week of playoff action in Ohio, Jacob.
Yeah.
We had some games that me and you kind of pinpointed last week that ended up. I was kind of proud of myself on one of them, just kind of what we
Yeah.
talked about, ringing true, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Turpin LaSalle game, we don't have the statistics for that game, um, complete statistics, I should say. So it's hard for us to cover it. But that turned out to be an amazing game, and we kind of alluded to that last week. Turpin was
Mhm.
kind of one of those teams this year that just was like, what did I say? Tease for Thorn in the side, tease for Turpin,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they would not go away. Unfortunately, they did lose to the Lancers from LaSalle, but nonetheless, some other great action. We'll start with Jacob. He's going to talk about a little bit of first run action from the GMC.
Yeah. So here we had Lakota East, and I mean this was a shootout,
Mm-hmm.
59-47 against Oak Hills. So, and I mean I've said it I think here for about 3 weeks in a row. Ryder Hooks
Mm-hmm.
is really all East needs to have a chance, in this playoff run here. Ryder Hooks goes for 17 rushes, 195 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think that's back to back weeks with 4 rushing touchdowns. And then he also added 3 receptions, 89 yards, and 1 touchdown. So, I mean, you're talking about almost a 300-yard all purpose day. And then, and 5 touchdowns. And then to top it off, an interception as well. So
Oh,
Ryder Hooks, yeah,
he did the
he had an
turnover thing
interception.
as the same
Uh,
2 weeks in a row.
yeah, and a couple, I think one tackle, but I mean, he's just everywhere, all over the field for East. And then Niall Knutsson is just playing really good football too. I mean, he went 15 for 21, 287, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. So I mean, the few keys for East, I think, is just winning the turnover battle they did in this week,
Mm-hmm.
and we're able to end up winning by 12 here. Um, I think Oak Hills had a couple interceptions and a fumble, so they actually ended up winning the turnover battle 3-1, which was huge for them, especially when you have the run game going that well, passing game's going really well. I mean, their offense is just so high powered. I
Mm-hmm.
think that it could possibly, if their offense is able to kind of keep pace as they have been these last few weeks, they're going to present X with some problems. Now, to counter that, because that'll be the matchup this week, is X and East. X does have 3 or 4, Division One, Power Five linebackers there.
Right.
So, you're looking at those guys if you're saying X to say, hey, we got to come in and we got to stop Ryder Hooks. Now, if they can do that, I think X will handily win this game. But that's the X factor right there. Is if East
Mm-hmm.
gets Ryder Hooks going, I think East offense really feeds off of that, and then they can get into some play action looks. Air the ball out down the field a little bit, work screen game with Ryder Hooks as well. There's a lot of things in that offense where they're explosive. They put up a lot of points in the GMC this year, which GMC is a good conference. So I really like that game's kind of the biggest game that I have circled this week
Mm-hmm.
because, and we kind of talked about it last week a little bit too, with just that's a possible upset there. And not taking anything away from St. X, I think they've had a really good season.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
their offense hasn't been overly explosive, where East has had these games where they look really, really dominant on offense. So I think just moving forward to next week, if East can kind of continue this run game dominance and opening up the pass game for them as well, it's going to be, it's going to probably end up being another shootout.
Mm-hmm.
And then one note I do want to make on Oak Hills, they did put up 47 points, so they were moving the ball a bunch. Cordell Ball, he had 6 receptions, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's a sophomore wide receiver for Oak Hills. Lincoln Schreiber, their junior quarterback, 288, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Emmett Johnson, a junior running back, 16 carries, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns. So I think if you're Oak Hills, you've seen some good stuff this year, and they played a lot of their young guys. So you hope that kind of pays off for them next year, where you get, quarterback, running back going into their senior year, a star wide receiver going into his junior year. I think there's definitely some positives that you can take away. Like, obviously it stinks. You lose week 1 of the playoffs, but you put up 47 points against a pretty good East team, and they have a lot of young talent on that team. So I think for Oak Hills, you just got to, take your time off, whatever, relax for a little bit, but, this offseason, get back after it. And I think they can make some noise next year as well. But really looking forward to East this week against St. X. Going to be a really fun matchup. But with that, just to keep it kind of moving, if you have any comments, you can kind of say whatever, and then we'll turn it over to you.
There was one thing I will say because I think you've absolutely painted the picture 100% correctly and hit the nail on the head with talking a little bit about East and what their success has been, especially in the latter half of this year into the playoffs now, where they've been able to find success both offensively and defensively. We talk a lot about playing complementary football on this podcast. But at the same time, there's a team that we talked briefly about earlier this year that it's West Claremont. And the reason why I bring up West Claremont is because the situation that Lakota East has, or not the situation, but the advantage that they have of having such a red hot, white hot running back. With right. I mean, I think that the stat was, it was like if his Landon Young, West Claremont's running back, ran for over 100 yards, the West Claremont was undefeated. Right now, obviously, over the course of this year, that changed and stuff, but at the time, it made a lot of sense. Right, this Lakota East team kind of reminds me a little bit of how they operate offensively. All flows through their running back having a really solid and productive day. And if he's scoring 4 touchdowns a game, I mean, shoot, I would be running my offense through him too, right? And I think, like you said, it opens up the passing game, and now Knutson's been fantastic this year. So I think it's really just like a perfect 1-2 punch that they have operating out of that backfield. And I do think they'll give a very, very solid defense in St. X some trouble. So keep an eye out on that for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I will I always love it when I have to say I'm kicking it to myself because I talk so much.
No, you are kicking it to yourself.
Yeah, but I'm kicking it to myself. There were a couple games that we had pinpointed, like I had said, Turpin and LaSalle was one of them. The other one was Mason and Fairfield. Unfortunately, we didn't have the stats to really kind of talk about those games. But one of the other games we kind of briefly mentioned last week was, or at least briefly talked about being possibly a solid game, was going to be that Wyoming Roger Bacon's matchup over there in is this Division 3, Division 4?
Region 16.
Division 4, Region 16. I'm never going to get those numbers right as long as I live, so bear with me. But yeah, so we talked a little bit about this game. Of course, you look at the final box score, it's kind of telling, I think, of where these two teams kind of ended up in terms of their seasons. Roger Bacon kind of had an up and down year, but they had been playing some decent football as of late. They played in a surprisingly good Miami Valley Conference this year. So I wasn't taking anything away from them, but Wyoming, it just like, we talked about it last week. Felt like Wyoming just was having a non-Wyoming year by Wyoming standards, right?
For sure.
And primarily that's because Indian Hill has been so gosh darn amazing this year. It's within their own conference. But you look at the final score, the box score of this game, 38-18 final for Wyoming, and then you take a look at kind of how the game sort of spelled out. It was pretty much all Wyoming for the start. 327 yards of total offense for the Cowboys, only 172 for the Spartans. But It was funny last week. I had mentioned Turpin does not go away. Well, neither does Roger Bacon, right? That kind of became their calling card all season, was that they would not quit, no matter what the score of the game was. And it's the same thing that happened here. You look at where the score was at the beginning, towards about the middle of the third quarter. Roger Bacon actually came back from down 10-0 at the end of the first quarter to being up 13-10 by midway of the third quarter. That's all going to come through the Spartans running back Jameer Mitchell, who he had 2 touchdowns, 47 yards and 17 attempts, so only 3 yards a carry. But then you look at his numbers this year, he was definitely a solid option for them out of the backfield. So Roger Bacon kept this, I think, a closer game than it really was. Wyoming just kind of took over there at the end. I mean, Wyoming's biggest strength, from what I've seen from them this year, because I have also seen them in person, is actually it's a two running back system they have. Jackson Hamilton and Ty Johnson Huff are their 2 starting running backs, and they kind of split carries. I think Jackson Hamilton normally gets more share of the carries, but they're both very, very good. And Jackson Hamilton kind of is a bruiser style kind of running back. We talk a lot about Taden Lorenzen kind of fitting into that mold. Jackson Hamilton certainly does as well. He had 160 yards on this game on 20 attempts, 2 touchdowns. And then Ty Johnson Huff is kind of like that. He's like the yin to the yang of Jackson Hamilton. He's more of a elusive back. He kind of play out in the slot receiver if he needs to. Comes in underneath, comes in the backfield, as that kind of shifty back. He had 90 yards and a touchdown on 8 carries, but he also had a decent receiving night. 1 yard. Well, he only had 1 catch, but it was for 20 yards. So that's a pretty decent little clip to have. And they really took over this game. That's 3 touchdowns between their running back duo, and then of course, David Dupuis, who's had kind of a quiet year this year. Same thing, kind of a quiet night on Friday. 97 yards on 9 attempts for a touchdown. He also had an interception. But one of the things about Wyoming that I really like going forward in the playoffs is that they continue to find different ways to revolutionize their offense. When I saw them earlier in the year, I actually saw them play in Indian Hill. One of the things I immediately noticed about the Cowboys was they were kind of one-dimensional in terms of their offensive game plan, right? The primary object was to let the running game kind of open up for the passing game, but they only ran in between the tackles. So it was like they need to find something to get a little bit more speed and boost that, kind of stretch the defense out a little bit, right? And I think they found that in Ty Johnson Huff. And that was my main takeaway from this game, was that if they continue to be able to utilize their 2 running backs as kind of like a cohesive unit, then they're going to be able to have good success in this playoffs. And obviously, I think they would run into Indian Hill at some point. So that would be the matchup to keep an eye on there. So, and then for Roger Bacon, valiant effort. They kept it close for 2 quarters, took the lead in the third. Unfortunately, that Cowboy offense kind of did their thing towards the end of the game, but nothing to hang their heads on. And it'll be interesting to see who Wyoming stacks up against next week.
Sorry, I was having some connection issues there.
I was like, dang, Jacob, was I that boring?
No, it was going it was spotty going in and out for a while there. I kept catching bits and pieces. But to what you said, I'm just looking at the stats for the year for Wyoming, and kind of you speaking to their offense evolving throughout the season. David Dupuis, their quarterback, he's led the CHL in passing yards, and he's by a wide margin by about 400, and he's got 1,893. And then they have both their running backs. Jackson Hamilton is almost at 1,000 yards rushing, and then Tyler Johnson Huff is about at 800 yards rushing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and then also Brylan Miltonberger, their wide receiver, is second in the CHL in receiving. So, and also second in interceptions.
There you go.
Yeah, so I just kind of at a snapshot of just stats. I haven't had the luxury of being able to watch them yet this year, but you have that many playmakers on the offensive side of the football. It makes it very hard to game plan versus like what we were talking about, in the game that I was going over this week with East. with East, it's like if you stop Ryder Hooks, that's going to give you a pretty good chance to win. With Wyoming, it's like you can say, okay, we're going to go in and stop their passing attack or try and slow down David Dupuis. Well, guess what? Then maybe both running backs go off for 100-yard days and, a few touchdowns combined between the two of them. Or vice versa, you say we're going in trying to stop the run game, then they air it out. And Wyoming just has that kind of history and, where they just consistently make these deep playoff runs. They're experienced, even if maybe some people on the team, you might have some freshmen and sophomores that haven't experienced it yet, but the upperclassmen, they've seen a couple deep playoff runs. They know what it takes to go to playing games in December. Really well coached team. And I would not be surprised, like you said, if it is Wyoming and Indian Hill, kind of down the road here in that Region 16. But
yeah,
that's all I
for
had
sure. No, you're good. You brought up a good point about David Dupuis. I think going into this year, and I do know this, that there were a lot of high expectations for him. If I'm correct, I believe his brothers have both played quarterback at Wyoming at some point in time, or played on Wyoming, and the name kind of carries weight, right?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of expectations put on him this year. Obviously, the big game for Wyoming is to beat Indian Hill. That didn't happen this year. So the discourse has kind of been, man, they just haven't been able to get over that hump. But you brought up a great point. I mean, despite the loss to Indian Hill, he's still leading the league in passing yards. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not an aspect of their game that you can overlook. Like, they've got a great rushing attack, but like you said, passing attack's just as good. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue to find ways to put up big numbers as the playoffs go on.
Yeah, absolutely. When speaking of playoffs, do we want to dive into some Ohio playoff football here?
Of course, I will let you. Jacob kind of rules the roost when it comes to the Ohio stuff. I'll handle the bluegrass variety.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'll still chime in as well. I think the thing about the Ohio State playoffs, right? And you could probably say this for a lot of the state playoffs, is that the first week is kind of like. Obviously, we had some great games this past weekend, but it's like the teams everyone's focused on don't play until the second week. So it's like, okay, what are we going to sink our teeth in during that week one? Well, here we are in week two, and now we really got some stuff got some games to look forward to.
This one was one of the games that we wanted to talk about. We just had no stats. Or anything to go off of. I would have loved to know what happened in this game, because I feel like both of these teams haven't necessarily been high scoring offenses throughout the year either. And, I think you saw this too down here in the, Lakota East and Oak Hills matchup too. The Lakota East Oak Hills matchup was 14-7 at the beginning of the year. East won.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know if it's just seeing these GMC schools for a second time in the year where it's, what these defenses are doing, and you kind of have a better idea of, what plays work and what don't. But absolute huge win for Fairfield, because I know when it was about week 7 or 8, maybe, we were talking about, if they could rattle off a couple wins here at the end of the year, they could make the playoffs. And I forget who they beat in that week 8 that kind of gave them a little bit of positive momentum. And they ended up losing. I was at the Princeton game week 9, but they were able to beat Oak Hills week 10, get into the playoffs. And then, boom, look at that. You end up beating a Mason team where I feel like Mason had some higher expectations coming into this season too. And securing a home game for that was huge, I'm sure, as well. Especially when it's a one-score game by the end of that game. Having home field advantage definitely makes a difference. So,
right. Like we talked about last week, the big thing for that game for us, both of us agreed, was that it felt like Mason. Now, granted, I don't know as much about the Fairfield players, but the Mason had the D'Angelo Birch factor, and he had that playoff experience, and he did a lot, played in a lot of playoff games when he was at Princeton. So it just felt like Mason would have the ace in up their sleeve. But man, shout out to Fairfield. The Indians have had a great season. Like we said, they've turned it on here in the last month, and have really started to play with a lot of momentum. Now, of course, they get to run into Big Bad Elder.
Yeah, yeah.
the
I will definitely be no, and this is no offense to Fairfield at all, but Elders, I don't see their perfect season getting ruined by Fairfield. So
Now
I think that can be I'm going to confidently say Elder in that one.
I will say this. I've officially dubbed the Elder defense to myself the Purple People Eaters, but the
Yeah,
Purple People Eaters better not be acting up like these GMC school. These GMC schools, I think, watched a little too much Cincinnati Bengals defense. They need to get that out of their system. We don't need the
yeah,
elder defense to succumb to those levels. I'm pretty sure the elder defense would play better than the Bengals defense on the
yeah,
field at this point. But nonetheless, I agree with you. I think that this is elder roles. Here at Fairfield, I think that everything is setting
yeah.
up for a collision course between one of. I mean, and I'm not counting out any of the other top tier schools like Princeton and so forth, but I feel like it's a
Mhm.
collision course for Moeller, Elder, and St. X because it all.
One
I mean, I'm
one
just
of the three. Yeah,
yeah, and it's recency, not even recency bias. It's just I think it's been that way for the last 7-8 years because it
yeah.
always ends up being one of those three schools here.
Now, see, I could see one of these two schools, whether it's Princeton or Winton Woods,
Mm-hmm.
giving. I definitely think they could give Elder some trouble because both of those teams are. So yeah, also Winton Woods did end up routing Little Miami 39-6 last week,
Mm-hmm.
so they are moving on to play at Princeton. But I think both of these teams have really, really solid defenses. And we've talked about it kind of with Elder. It's like Elder's offense runs through the run game of Tommy Becker and then
Mm-hmm.
their quarterback, Caden Estep. So if you have a solid front seven that can kind of slow that down, which both Winton Woods and Princeton have,
Mm-hmm.
then it ends up just turning into like, who's going to end up scoring the most points this game,
Mm-hmm.
or who can get a couple, get to 21 points, basically. It's like, I think that, matchup in the semis or, yeah, I think it's the semis there.
Yeah, it is.
Um, I feel like that's going to kind of be the, can you get to 21 points? Whoever gets to 21 first is going to win. But
And the
really,
interesting,
I feel like Princeton and Winton Woods is a toss up. I don't really know which way to
yeah,
lean on that.
that's a tough game to call. And the thing that I think about here's the thing I think about when it comes to Winton Woods. So it's kind of a double edged sword, right? I mean, you look at that matchup, and let's say Winton Woods were to go on, it's like, okay, that's something different than Elder hasn't seen all year. I'm not sure if Elder and Princeton played this year, but it's not like they
No.
don't. It's not like they never see each other, right? I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
typically kind of they kind of commingle on their schedules, if you would say, every once in a while. I mean, we know Princeton plays Moeller every year, but my point is that Winton Woods they play in the ECC, and I'm not sitting here saying that that makes them lesser than some of these other schools, but it's just a different level. Right,
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting because I do think Winton Woods is a really, really talented program. I mean, they're the
Mm-hmm.
only team this year that really kind of put Anderson on the ropes per se, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, that matchup. Like you said, it's a toss up. I can't sit here and vehemently say one or the other. I want to lean Princeton, but I'm not counting out Winton Woods either.
Yeah. And I mean, Princeton's two losses this year were to 8-2 Middletown and then Moeller. They got beat
Mm-hmm.
week one to Moeller by like 3 scores, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, I think I'm going to lean Princeton as well, just off of kind of who they've played. They've seen probably a little bit different looks than Winton Woods has this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think it'll be a 1-score game there. And I think whoever wins can give Elder a run for their money the following week.
For
Um,
sure.
but yeah, kind of just moving down here. Um, on the bracket, it says Lakota West won 16-0, but on the GMC website, it says West won 30-0. So, not sure which one to believe there. I'm going to
Well,
assume the GMC website is correct because they have like the scoring, who scored and everything. But
mm-hmm. Well, I
I
mean,
think
either
that's a
way, they
huge
pitched.
win.
Yeah,
Yeah,
either way,
shutout.
they pitched a shutout, right? So, yeah, no, I think that's a. I think for West, that's a momentum shifting performance.
Absolutely. I mean, they've just kind of, I think, struggled to kind of find their footing all year and really rattle off some, like 3, 4 wins in a row to build positive momentum. It seems like every time they get some momentum, they'll drop one, and then it's kind of that cycle been repeating. But man, I mean, that's a really rough matchup for Moeller. Coming off of bye too. You get the little rest versus rust debate there.
Hmm.
You know how much rest helps, and I know Moeller. At least a couple times I watched them play, they were a little bit banged up throughout the season. So I don't know if the bye week was able to allow some guys to get healthy for them. But I mean, it seems like West is always year in and year out. It's like either they're playing St. X or Moeller at some point in
Hmm.
the playoffs. So these teams have some familiarity, and I expect that to be, um, you know, pretty good game. Honestly, I'm still gonna got to take the data and what we've seen all year out of both teams, and you know, safe picks definitely leaning Moeller, but I West is going to make it difficult, I think, for this Moeller offense this week. I think they'll come out with a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah, like you said, the health factor is definitely a curveball in the discussion when you bring up Moeller right now, because as like you said, I do know they've been struggling a little bit in that department, with some guys they'd love to have back. Now, obviously, the week off may have helped them get some guys back, but I don't love this matchup for Moeller either. I think looking at least I haven't seen them play this year, but I do keep track of their stuff and look at kind of how their games have laid out. It feels like if they run into an offense that can match them, um, blow for blow, because obviously Moeller's got a pretty high flying offense. Now they haven't reached 24 levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Ponatowski hasn't thrown for 15,000 yards or whatever he did last year, but they're still a very good offense. And it
Yeah.
feels like whenever they run into a team that can kind of match them, especially in terms of physicality, they've struggled. And I really pinpoint that Ed's game as being the one that you strike kind of raises red flags for me, for Moeller this year. It feels like they're just missing a little bit of something.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, right, is they're absolutely 100% talented enough to go on another run to the state finals. But I'm not going to count out Tom Bolden, right? I
Yeah.
mean, he's got plenty of experience in this situation. They West had that devastating loss to East. They bounced back with a shutout victory. So they're riding the momentum, right? That bye week is actually doing, I think, Mueller no favors right now,
Right.
at least for this matchup, I should say. So it'll be interesting to see, how the game plays out. I'll still lean Moeller in my final prediction, because I do think that they have the talent to take them to the next level, or not the next level, but the next round. But I'm definitely not sitting here saying that this is going to be Big Mo rolls all the way. I think this is going to be
Right.
a really good matchup.
I do want to point out just one thing in this game. So Chris Bradley, a defensive back for Lakota West, enters this game with 6 interceptions and 9 passes deflected. So, I'm kind of looking at him and a couple of other guys on the defense. As a whole, their defense has caused 12 interceptions and has forced 4 fumbles. So I think, because I'm not entirely sold on the West offense
Mm-hmm.
being as high powered as Moeller's, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think they have a lot of playmakers on that defensive side of the football. And I think this could be one of those games where you get a big momentum changing turnover that could help swing it in West's direction. But I am also going to agree with you, Moeller. And then just for the sake of time, we already spent a lot of time kind of talking about this East and St. X matchup um, throughout, kind of the last couple of weeks. And my hot take is I am going to take Lakota East in this one.
You've saved me at least a solid 2 minutes of trying to talk my way out of being labeled a St. X hater.
Yeah,
Obviously, I think everybody knows that I went to Moeller, so naturally, St. X was our rivals. I'm actually going to take Lakota East in this matchup as well. I think that they've got it rolling right now, and I think that
I do too.
Saint Xavier's got a great defense. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like we say all the time, if you want to be competitive in the GSCL South, you have to have a good defense. But
Mhm.
there's just something about the Thunderhawks right now. I think that they've got the right mojo. I think the same kind of situation. I think that bye week's doing St. X no favors
Well,
because, like you
that's their
said,
second bye week in a row too.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
So
like
just compound that doublet, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's always tough, especially when you're sitting kind of at that three. Whatever, I can't read. Are they 6 seed?
they're the
Three.
third seed, 3-6 matchup.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
3-6 matchup, right? That's the equivalent of getting the 8-9 in the NCAA tournament. Right, those
Mhm.
are two very, and that does help Saint X a little bit to be playing at home
Yeah.
field advantage. But I don't know, just something in my gut tells me East is going to pull it out, and we're going to be sitting here next week talking about what a big, truthfully, if that were to happen, what a program shifting upset that is.
Yeah, especially with John Kitna there at the helm
Yeah,
too. Just kind of building something there. But real quick, I do want to touch on Region 2 real quick for Division 1 because Lebanon did get a win 22-21 over Kettering Fairmont. And I
there
watched
you go.
Lebanon earlier in the year. Lebanon's got a solid squad, but they got the middies this week. I am going to go with Middletown because Middletown's been unbelievable this year. They were able to beat Princeton towards the end of the year, week 10. I think they have a lot of momentum and also not a ton of competition here compared to Region 4 and Division 1.
Huber
Like
Heights
Middletown
Wayne's
has, yeah,
Huber Heights
Huber Heights
Wayne's
Wayne,
always one of those schools that shows up this time of year, so I
Hilliard
wouldn't count them
Bradley is
out.
usually
Yeah,
okay. Obviously, Troy's a 2 seed.
Springfield.
Springboro and Springfield are 4 or 5. But I do really like Middletown to come out of this one. And
I do
with all
too.
that being said, yeah, you
Honestly,
go real quick
I was
before
gonna
I
say
switch
something
off.
really quick. I do also like the middies in this matchup. However, I think that Lebanon's got I think Luke Fowler. I think they've got enough talent
Yeah,
offensively to hang. So it'll definitely be, I think, an interesting one to look back on.
I agree.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm going to move on to D2 here. Just kind of trying to be aware of everyone's time here. So Withrow picks up a 45-0 win over Piqua, I guess is how you
Piqua,
pronounce that. Piqua?
Piqua. I think
Yeah.
Piqua. I think that's it. You'd think we'd
Um,
know by now of
yeah.
living here our whole lives, but
Yeah. But I can say it's tough that they got to play Anderson.
yeah,
And I don't see Anderson losing that game.
the battle of the black and orange, right?
Yeah.
I think Anderson rolls here pretty handily, but
Yeah.
I don't think
I
that's
mean,
an indictment of Withrow. I think they've had a solid
no.
year. It's just what do I always call them, the buzzsaw, man.
Yeah.
That's a hard
What
game to draw round two.
absolutely. And I think if Withrow wasn't in the same conference as Taft this year,
Hmm.
with the season Taft's had, we would have been talking about Withrow a lot more too. But
Hmm.
just kind of
Agreed.
Taft gotten a lot of that talk from
Just they
that
steal the
conference,
spotlight, right?
especially. Yeah. And then, kind of moving forward, you see here, this is a game, another one of those games we wanted to cover, but didn't have full stats. So I would have loved to kind of see the stats on this and see who kind of made these plays for LaSalle. It looks like, the end of the game came down to a missed extra point for Turpin, and that's how LaSalle snuck out of this. So I think if you're LaSalle, you're obviously thrilled you got out of there with a win last week. But
Not an
and
easy
no,
pull.
yeah, and not discrediting Turpin at all.
No, I
But
think I.
it's
Sorry.
like when you play in the GCL South, it's like
Mhm.
your competition, like the competition LaSalle is playing is a lot different than the competition Turpin's playing throughout the
Mhm.
year. So I think if you're LaSalle, you're kind of hoping for maybe a little bit more convincing win this week
Mhm.
against Xenia, because you're going into Anderson most likely the following week if you pick up a win. So I think they just need to find a way to kind of continue building momentum and maybe get a two score win here to
Yeah,
be like, yes,
100%.
we can definitely hang with Anderson. So I don't know if you have anything to add with that.
I think that LaSalle take. I think it's a tough draw for them. I think
Yeah,
Xenia is not an easy opponent.
I
They're
agree.
always they're just out of our area, closer to Dayton.
Hmm.
But they're always solid and not, I would not take them lightly. Um, LaSalle, I think they do win, and I think they end up with Anderson. It'll be interesting to see, like you just said, what their performance is this week compared to the last. But on that same note, I've been kind of not tooting their horn, not tooting the Turpin horn, but just being cognizant and aware of how impressive I think their season actually was on, not maybe not on paper, but just
Yeah.
the way they played this year. Turpin had a pretty rough stretch over the last, I want to say, 2 or 3 years. I want to say, they kind of fell off the map at the beginning of the Anderson regime, so to say, and the ECC.
Yeah.
But I mean, they fought hard this year, and they took a GCL South team to the wire, and that is nothing to hang your hat on. That
No,
is
absolutely.
hang your head, I should
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Hang your head on, right? That by no means is that a disappointing result. I mean, well, it is to lose, but not by no means is that a
Well,
demoralizing one.
I don't think it helps Turpin either, and I'm not sure how it works as much over there, but I know Nagel, I think, is the middle school feeder school that goes into both
Yes.
Anderson and Turpin. So, if you're talking 5, 6 years ago, whenever, Coach Dreyer got over to Anderson and started building up a powerhouse there, you got to wonder how many kids Turpin loses a year to just kids saying, like, oh, I'm going to go to Anderson instead of
Well,
Turpin because,
could be
they're,
different now. It could be different now, but as admittedly as an Anderson E growing
Mhm.
up, even though I didn't go to public school, but I do know this. It used to be. It's usually, I think it's where it depends on where you live,
Okay.
what part of the
I didn't
township you
know
live
if
in.
it's open enrollment or
They think they changed that. I think they changed that. I think it's an open enrollment now, but it used to be where you lived. I could be wrong if it's
because I feel like
still.
that happens a little bit with like West and East sometimes too. I know there was players when I went to high school that had switched from East to West throughout, or vice versa, throughout my high school career. So
Hmm.
I think it's just a similar situation where you got two high schools so close together that are public. It's like
Hmm.
just wonder how many kids they've lost in the last 5 to 7 years to Anderson because
Right.
Anderson's program's been so good. Um, but enough with Turpin. We're going to move on to Harrison beating Vandalia Butler 40-7, and Harrison gets Kings, which is a really tough draw for Harrison. I think Kings is going to win this game. Kings has had a phenomenal year. That's just gone so under the radar. I feel like
Hmm.
because they play in the same conference as Anderson and Witten Woods, but Kings went 8-2 this year. Um, and then the other problem that Kings has had, or they actually went 9-1 this year. My
Hmm.
apologies.
They only lost to
Um,
Anderson.
yeah. So another thing is you have the GCL South teams that have been off the charts this year. Princeton, it's like there's been so many other teams where Kings really hasn't gotten their shine, but I mean Kings I think is a problem in this. You know,
Wow.
because it's like you look, I feel like they have, and Aiken ended up getting beat 62-20 to Lima Senior, but between Trotwood and Lima, I think whoever kind of wins this game between Kings and Harrison, I think they're going to have a pretty good chance to play Anderson in that regional final matchup here. And I like Kings a lot. To possibly even upset if they're able to make it all the way to possibly upset Anderson. Seeing them for a second time this year.
So that's a scorcher there,
Hot
there,
take.
Jacob.
Hot
Yeah,
take. Yeah,
it's a
hot
scorcher,
take.
man. I like Kings as well. And I also do. I don't know enough about Trotwood or Lima to make a full assessment, but I do think Kings and Anderson are I think due to meet each other in this region in the final.
Yeah. And I think that would be a lot of fun as well. The top two
Mm-hmm.
teams from the ECC this year, duking it out for the regional final. Be a good game. So D3 will be really quick. D4 take maybe 3-4 more minutes, and then we'll move on to Kentucky and Indiana. Indiana will be very brief.
Yeah,
There's only two schools, but
three this week actually. Three this week. I have a school I
three.
want to bring up. So
Nice.
yeah,
So D3 here, we have McNick picking up the win over Chillicothe, and they get to play London, who I feel like a couple weeks ago I looked up, and I think they're undefeated for the year. So definitely an uphill battle this week for McNick, but we'll be rooting for them here in this division because there's really not a lot. So you got Talawanda down here too. In
mm-hmm.
Talawanda, we do cover a little bit, and Baden. So Baden Alter. Oh, this is a huge game right here.
Yep.
Because Alter won 35-7 against Bellbrook, and was Alter the team that beat Baden week 10?
McNick did.
McNick did. So you got three of these schools in the GCL co-ed. You got two of them meeting this week, and then possibly another one meeting down the road if we come back up here. If McNick can somehow upset London this week. But yeah, so I really like the matchup down here between Baden and Alter. I think that'll be a really fun matchup. Hard nose. The GCL co-ed also produces some really good football. It just gets overshadowed by the South a lot. And Talawanda's had a sneaky good season too. Mm-hmm. They don't get a lot of talk because they're kind of up there a little bit, but Tip City I know is always solid too, but definitely Talawanda's got some momentum going into this game, coming off of doubling up the team they played Goshen. So it'd be pretty cool if you saw Talawanda and then one of these two teams playing after this week. But I mean, I would have to say I like Baden to end up winning this region, and Baden to beat Alter this week again. But I don't know what your thoughts are for this region.
I would have to go with Baden taking care of Alter. I think Baden is, despite the Week 10 loss to a solid picnic school, I think they are definitely a favorite to go to the finals of this region. And then kind of speaking back towards McNick, I think they've had, like we talked about it last week with that upset win, they've kind of had to reinvent themselves a little bit offensively when their starting quarterback went down for the year. So they've had a quietly, solid season. But I don't know enough about London, but I do know they're very good. So yeah. I'll go with London there.
And then, moving on to D4, the Region 16. Shu's favorite region, honestly, might be up there for my favorite region as well. But so Indian Hill got the bye week 1, and then they are playing Washington, Washington. Yeah,
Washington Courthouse.
Yeah. I didn't know CH was for Courthouse. Thank you for that. And they came off of a good win against New Richmond, which New Richmond, I feel like we don't talk about the Southern Buckeye Athletic and Academic Conference, but they are in that conference with Clinton Massey, Goshen, some of those schools and stuff. And New Richmond's had some good years in the last few years, so definitely a good win for Washington Courthouse. Washington, but they play Indian Hill, which I think will be a pretty convincing victory for Indian Hill.
Give me the Braves.
But this one, I think, has some potential to be a closer game, and one that's closer than most of the games that Taft has played all year. Because, man, do you remember Clinton Massey last year, how we talked about them some? And I know this year's a little bit different, but Clinton Massey's still 10-1. And like last year, they were just absolutely steamrolling opponents all year, and they made some noise come playoff time. Um, I just think Taft's played a lot of blowout games this year. They have to be especially careful because Clinton Massey's a pretty good team, and if they get into a close game, you never know what can happen. You can't just rely
Yep.
on, just getting the running clock on by the first half. It's like, if you're in a 14-14 ball game at the end of the first half, you got to find a way to deal with some adversity and overcome it. Now, should Taft win this game? Absolutely. They're loaded with talent, well-coached team. But I'm just saying, don't overlook Clinton Massey.
Jacob's ruining me tonight. I had three things I was gonna do tonight to kind of like just give the wow factor. I was gonna pick Lakota East to beat St. X, and I'll tell you about I'll talk about the Indiana high school here in a second. And I was gonna pick Clinton Massey to beat Taft. I'm not kidding. I think Clinton Massey has a legitimate shot at this game because you talked about it. Taft, listen, do not get me wrong. Taft has had an incredible year. They are loaded with talent. But this Clinton Massey team is a tough opponent to draw. I mean, we talk about, this is a tough draw for this team because they got to play the team coming off a bye. Taft's got a tough draw here, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that Clinton Massey is a very underrated team that we don't talk about a lot, that we probably should more. But that was one of my other. That's my hot take. There you go, Jacob. You had yours earlier.
Well,
I'll have mine.
I mean,
I'll have mine now.
Seems like the brain trust is working. We've only done this for about like 25, 26 weeks in total here over the last couple of years. So I guess you get some merging of ideas there. But yeah, definitely a really rough. For as good of a year Taft had to only get the 4 seed, and now you're getting Clinton Massey as your first game, where it's like versus. Not saying that this Valley View has an easier draw with getting Wyoming. I think both of those schools might present similar challenges for Taft. But like this one down here, we're for CHCA, which CHCA's had a great season. But I mean, how much better is it to be in this spot if you're CHCA playing either Brookville or Franklin Bishop Fenwick over playing Wyoming or Roger Bacon or Clinton Massey, basically?
I will give you my final prediction for this region. I think the actual final is Indian Hill and CHCA.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I want to see Indian Hill and Taft, but man, that I have a feeling about Clinton Massey, and I could totally. Yeah. Somebody on Twitter could post this final score on Friday and be like, "Yeah, that sounds about right." But that's my hot take. So there you go.
So I'll disagree with you here. I think so. I said to watch out for Clinton Massey, but I do think Taft gets by this week, and I think Taft beats Indian Hill and ends up winning this region.
Okay.
If they can get by Clinton Massey this week, I think they win the region. But we shall see. Have to keep it at least a little bit.
This is between me and you. It'll probably be like 60-0 Taft, and I'll look like a complete dummy. But
hey, I was saying the same stuff too. I was saying that I think it'll be a good matchup. But so with this, I know we're already close to 50.
Well, I can push through this next 2 segments because there's a lot of that. The Ohio stuff is tough because almost every team we have to talk about.
Like we've said, after this week, it'll definitely thin out a decent amount because we had all those teams on bye last week. This week, they're not on bye. So some Cincinnati teams do have to lose, unfortunately. Not everybody can continue playing.
Yes, I agree.
Do you want me to pull up Indiana, or do you have Indiana pulled up?
Can you pull up the Indiana really quick? I just want to, and I'll pull up.
I have 5A right here. So I just wanted to point out with the 5A, I have East Central highlighted right here. East Central picked up a win against Franklin Community, I believe, 21-7. So big win for them. And then this Whiteland team, they're coming off a 42-21 victory over Columbus East. But I mean, you look right here. East Central wins this game this week. They're in regional championships against the winner of Cathedral and New
Yeah.
Palestine. So, in Cathedral, we all know is a really good program. So, I think if you end up getting this East Central Cathedral matchup, especially if you are over in that East Central area, I mean, you're missing out on a great game if you don't go to that on the 14th. So, but this week, they got to take care of business against Whiteland, and then other side of the bracket, nothing really going on.
Now just head on over to
3A. 3A. Okay, I got that.
3A.
As
well. Yeah. And then I'll talk about what I want to talk about. So obviously, the two main schools we talk about, Indiana or Lawrenceburg or East Central and Lawrenceburg. Lawrenceburg did get their a win over Franklin County, which I think is a solid win for them. Franklin County is a solid program. But they faced the third team, the mystery third team that I've alluded to here on a couple different occasions tonight and in the past, the Greensburg Pirates. Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know, Greensburg is actually probably close enough to be considered our region. They're just on the outskirts of southern Indiana, southeastern Indiana. And they have had a long, hard road to get here. I know that I believe they had 2 or 3 seasons in the recent memory that they didn't win a single game. And here they are in the regional semifinals up against Lawrenceburg. I think this is the regional semifinals, correct?
Yep.
Sectional championships.
Yeah. Which I think that is regional semis.
They're just calling it something
different. Worded differently. Yeah.
Yeah, but here they sit, man. I mean, I think it's worth shouting out the Greensburg Pirates for getting to where they are now, and they did not. They beat South Dearborn, who I know is not. I think they went 4-7 this year, so obviously not an incredible season, but hey, man, they've won 2 games in the playoffs. And now they've got, truthfully, I mean, one of the big bad bullies of the area, right? I mean, what a better time to make a statement. Now, I do think Lawrenceburg will hang on and take care of business here. But you just shout out to Greensburg. I think that's great for that school and that program. I think that it's definitely worth mentioning. So it'll be fun to see what the final score of that game is on Friday night.
No, I love you pointing that out, too, because I know just throughout the year, we probably don't show enough love to Indiana, especially the way we do Kentucky. But there's also a lot more schools that we kind of report on in this northern Kentucky area. Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of touching on a few of these schools. It definitely helps, especially
absolutely. Yeah, and kind of just Jacob already segued for me. Look at him go. He handled it for me. So obviously last week we didn't have Kentucky. This week we do have the Kentucky State playoffs are up and rolling at the beginning of this. At the end of this week, and I'm just going to quickly go through them. So for the sake of time, because obviously first round of the playoffs, there's a lot of schools in here we don't cover. Just for example, so St. X Louisville does play Southern. If we move down and Trinity plays Great Crossing, I know Great Crossings come up a couple different times. In our box scores this year. Simon Kenton, one of our schools, plays Oldham County. I do know Oldham.
That's a tough. I was just looking ahead, like Trinity versus Simon Kenton. That would be a rough draw for Simon Kenton if they're able to get that win there.
Obviously, Simon Kenton is kind of one of those programs. Oh, that's going to take me to their. So now you're going to see what their record was. I think they went. Of course, it doesn't give me their.
Total, you got to do it. You do it by hand.
Yeah, they went
5-5.
Okay, so they went 500. That was on accident. I didn't realize if I clicked on the school name, it would take me to their page. But nonetheless, Oldham County is they're not bad. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that game goes. I think that's not a great draw for Simon Kenton. We'll just keep rolling. Ryle looking for a little bit of redemption. They went all the way to state finals last year, ended up not getting it done. They play Eastern, who, as we can see here, I think that the Raiders should probably roll. And then Campbell County, another one of our local schools, they play Ballard. Campbell County's had a rough year this year. It doesn't look like almost my last name. It doesn't look like that. Ballard's necessarily going to roll, but Campbell County has struggled a little bit this year. They've been on a pretty rough
Yeah.
stretch. But we'll see. I think that'll be worth keeping an eye on. That's just 6A, so in Ohio terms, that's Division 1. I'll quickly just keep rolling here. Division 5 or Region 5A.
So this is your Covcath and
yes, wherever they might be. So there's Dixie Heights.
Dixie.
They play Collins, Scott County, and Connor. There's a local matchup for you.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of those in this part of the Kentucky State
You got
playoffs.
Cooper right above it, too.
Cooper plays South Oldham. So some of our schools play the Oldhams. I guess is Covcath not in here? I thought they were.
Actually, they are 4A, I guess.
Okay, they're 4A. Yeah, other than that, not a whole lot. I'm just making sure I didn't
pretty
miss
much
anybody.
Just cheering for Cooper.
Keep an eye on
Boone.
There's Boone County. So kind of just this general area of the bracket right here. Mm-hmm. We have a little bit of a home matchup. I think Scott. It's not Scott. I get that mixed up all the time. Scott County is a different part of. I get Scott and Scott County mixed up all the time. Connor plays Scott County. Scott County is a solid program, so I would expect them to beat Connor. Cooper should take care of South Oldham. Boone County struggled this year. I don't know much about Woodford County, but I'll go with the Woodford. And then Dixie Heights is not a terrible program, so I'd keep an eye on them in this bracket as well. Quickly moving on here to 4A, and this is when you do get to, I believe we get to Covcath. Yep, there they are. Covcath, they take on Boyd County, which I'm pretty sure they play Boyd County. Yeah, no. There's a lot of counties in Kentucky, so bear with me. But they play Boyd County, who, if we look at their record, not terrible, right? So I think Covcath should roll over Boyd County here. They would face either Johnson Central or Harrison County. Highlands, there's the big bad guys from that have kind of dominated the headlines this year, right?
Yeah,
they get
they're the one there.
Yes, they don't give numbers here. Isn't that annoying?
Yeah,
They're. I think that this bracket kind of eventually we get to that.
Highlands and Covcath eventually match up. Yeah,
I think we get there. I will say this though, Ashland Blazer. I'm assuming they're like an 8 seed. I don't think they've had the year. They've been pretty good this year. They're usually pretty solid. So I would keep an eye on that potential matchup there, Highlands, Ashland, Blazer. And I think that pretty much covers us.
About it. Not sure if there's any in 3. I know Beechwood's 2.
Yeah. Let me just double check. Lexington. Oh, Lloyd Memorial.
Yeah.
They've been pretty good this year.
No, they have had a
undefeated. Undefeated. So yeah, they've been really good this year.
The Juggernauts.
That's I love that. I love the Juggernauts, man. They play Bath County. I would expect Lloyd to roll there. And I think that's it, man. I think that's everything for our schools in 3A. I'm just double checking. Union, I guess, kind of close. We don't really cover them.
Nah, not much.
Yeah, that covers 3A. Let's move on to 2A. It's 2A is where it starts to get a little bit different. There's less schools, so you have buys and stuff. Obviously, Crittenden is kind of close to us. We don't talk about them much, but they haven't been terrible this year. So what is that? They're probably around 7-3, I think that is.
Yeah.
So not bad this year. And then Beechwood, of course, we talk about them all the time. They'll play the winner of Morgan County or Walton Verona. I'd keep an eye on Morgan County. They're not a bad school. Now, I do think Beechwood's got this. I think they're the clear favorite, as they should be. But Morgan County's not a bad program either. St. Henry, they got that first win this year. Earlier in the year, they got 2 actually back-to-back. So good for them. First year of assistance. They'll play Breathitt County. I think that's everything.
You never know. Maybe they can make history and get a playoff.
Yeah, you'd love to see that, right? You get the first playoff win. Keep an eye here. Martin County, I believe. Yep, the Cardinals. They're quietly very good. Almost always this matchup here. This matchup ends up being Beechwood and Martin County. Yes. So keep an eye on them. I know they're not in our region or our area per se, but just keep a quick eye on them, and then we'll just quickly go to 1A, where we will see a few of our schools. So there's Newport Central Catholic, who's kind of had a down year this year. The down year, of course, being
4
6-4.
losses, yeah,
Right.
still over
So
500.
yeah, so keep an eye on that. They'll play Trimble County. Bishop Brossart is one of the most defensive-based teams in the entire city. Obviously, they've rattled off some
God,
big scoring games here towards the end of their season, but look at
how
some of their other.
awesome! How awesome is that 5-8 game?
Yeah, no kidding, right? I mean, come on, man, that's pretty cool. And then we get into Holy Cross. They've been very good this year. I believe they're undefeated. They are. So keep an eye on Holy Cross. They play one of my other favorite team names of all time, the Green Devils. They have not had a great year this year, but just keep an eye out for Holy Cross. I think make a run here. And then we'll keep going. Newport plays Ludlow. That's actually kind of a rivalry matchup there.
Yeah.
A inner city game there. I think Ludlow has had a okay year this year. Yeah, I think they're a little under 500, but Newport hasn't been bad either. Let's just double check. Yeah, they've been okay. So keep an eye out there, and then it gets kind of
not a ton of other schools.
I think that's everything. Everything you're going to be paying attention to is right in here. And there's some solid schools from this area in there. I look at Newport Central Catholic and Holy Cross as being kind of the two right here, this matchup on the 21st, that could be worth keeping an eye out for. I know that was quick, but we're already at an hour. So there's Kentucky. There's Kentucky. I did that as quick as I possibly could.
And there's our first over an hour show.
Yes,
and hopefully the last one for the rest of the year.
Sorry, Greg and Dan. There's a lot of playoffs to cover.
We apologize to anybody who lost their attention span to listening to us yap as well. But
well,
the good thing is you can always listen on podcasts.
Yeah, there you go. Jacob's got it. Jacob rolled right into the ending of the show.
So, if you decided you had other things that were better to do than to listen to us right now, tomorrow or later on in the week, maybe Friday before some of the games, and check out all our TriState Football content on the new and improved website, TriStateFootball.com, and catch our show on any major podcast platforms, your Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Amazon, whatever it is. Check out our social medias, TriState Football, on Instagram, Twitter, well, not Twitter, X, and
you can still call
Facebook.
Twitter, it's okay.
It's always going to be Twitter in my heart, unfortunately. So apologize for being so long-winded tonight, but there's a lot to cover. And, a lot of really good action happening across all three states, and nothing better than some playoff football.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun tonight. I enjoy going through the playoffs and stuff. It gets fun around. It always is fun to do this, but it's always fun to talk about the playoffs because it's, it's decision time, right? It's do or die. So it's fun to talk about. Sorry it was an hour, but thanks, Jacob, for kicking butt on the outro, man. Look at you go.
All right, that's our one in for the year.
There you go. Yeah. So just next time you just do whatever you want. That's fine. I don't care. All right, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks for listening and tuning in. We will see you next week, hopefully for less than an hour.